time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
So this is Robert Evans. You might know who he was through the autobiography he wrote called The Kid Stays in the Picture. He started out in Hollywood as a rather dubious actor. He wasn't very good. But he got behind the camera. He got behind, basically into the administration of making movies and fell in love with it. He ended up being the senior vice president at Paramount Pictures from, I think, 1968 or 66 to 1973 or 4. He was responsible as the head of Paramount for classics as Rosemary's Baby, Love Story, which starred his wife at the time, Ally McGraw, and of course The Godfather 1 and 2. This is him with Francis Ford Coppola. He was also, when he left Paramount Pictures with a 5-movie production deal, he's also responsible for Chinatown. And I can't talk about any of this without talking about Robert Evans. Robert Evans, in my opinion, was one of those executives that understood, I think, the individual filmmakers and what they wanted, what they needed to the freedom they needed to make a movie. And he was very different from the man that took over for him, Barry Diller. Barry Diller has recently put out an autobiography, and in the autobiography, he complains about George Lucas being sanctimonious and a hypocrite because what Lucas wanted to do was rewrite his deal for more money. And it ended up happening. Diller wasn't happy. And the reason why is when you read between the lines is the executive got the runaround and got outmaneuvered by a mere filmmaker. Okay. All right. George Lucas is one of those very rare occurrences in Hollywood. And what I mean by that is not everybody in Hollywood can do what he does. He's a creative and a businessman. And he wanted to make enough money on his own to make movies that he wanted to make, right? And without the deals he made with Fox Studios, 20th Century Fox Studios, over Star Wars, and Paramount, in rewriting his deal with Paramount for Indiana Jones, he would not have been able to make the prequels. He would not have been able to do the things that he wants to do. And when I look at I think, envy and greed of people like Barry Diller, Hollywood doesn't like George to begin with. George is in it for George's vision. He's like, in some ways, a Michelangelo of Hollywood, where you hire this guy, he's got a temper, a titanic temper, he knows what he wants, and you're going to have to just let him do what he wants. So he took $1 billion from his own pocket to create the Lucas Museum of Narrative Arts. And a lot of stuff has gone on there, right? And, we've talked about this before where older liberals, George still thinks, I believe, that Richard Nixon hides under his bed. All right. The boomers of that generation, the boomers, are fixated on things that happened when they were younger, and they can't let it go. It's like, okay. They'll defend Barack Obama, who's as corrupt as hell. But oh my God, the fantasies they make up. Anyway, we're not talking about that. George is not woke. Steven Spielberg is not woke. Harrison Ford definitely isn't woke. All right? Harrison Ford isn't of that generation. He's a year older than they are. He's a year older than George. Or a couple of years older than George. And he was born in 1942, so he's still technically the traditional generation. And they don't like woke. So when George hired the staff to run the museum, hired a lady named Sandra Jackson Dumont, you will see a picture of her, and you will say, and you will immediately go, woke, racist, you name it. And she has recently stepped down and was replaced by a guy named Bernardo Rondo. And it's an interesting little thing because a bunch of museum staffers were also laid off. Many of these people had pronouns in their names, in their bios. Many of these people were obviously woke. And it's one of those things where when you see all this, when you put two and two together, this is Sandra Jackson Dumont, and she is not there anymore. I looked at her IMDb account, and yeah, woke as fuck, actually. So George got rid of her, and I think the reason why is because her vision was political, and his vision is completely about the history of film. And since he is the guy that owns the museum, then it's his baby, not hers. And he fired her. He brought Rondo in to take over. And again, you got to understand, woke is repellent to people who are actually liberal, right? Look at Bill Maher. Look at others when they talk about it. Even John Cleese, who, as far as I'm concerned, is a British twit. They don't like woke because woke is fascism. When Ronald Reagan was quoted saying, "If fascism ever comes to America, it'll be disguised as liberalism." That's a paraphrase, but there you go. And it's true. And you cannot have something like a museum dedicated to the narrative arts, which is film, run by people who, hate white people, who are divisive over everything that is done. And it just doesn't work, right? There are people in Hollywood that are not programmed that way. Like I've said, Spielberg isn't. He has said things about changing films that were made 50, 60 years ago because they don't fit the narrative now. Others, William Shatner said it. So, this is the thing. George wants what George wants. He is the guy that runs, this is his museum, and he gets to do what he wants. Let's talk more.
embarrassing for you. I left you a message not to come. I'm passing on The Godfather.
They really didn't understand what the word graffiti meant.
They didn't. The studio executives generally are not the most sophisticated people in the world. And you will find that if you go to Hollywood. I hope you don't, because you don't want to be oppressed by people who are not as smart as you are. And I'm dumb. And obviously...
So you can see that the battles that George fought with studios informed his opinion about studio executives. He was lucky with Fox that he had Alan Ladd Jr. in his corner. Alan Ladd was willing to let him run free to make Star Wars, and the payoff for Fox was really good, right? I mean, they got to be the harbingers of I think, the greatest film franchise in the history of filmmaking. I mean, Star Wars was groundbreaking, even more so than Jaws. Jaws might have created the summer blockbuster, but Star Wars basically gave film a whole new narrative, right? And, George has always said, I've never made a movie in Hollywood, I would say, except for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because I think they actually had the sets there in Hollywood. But as far as the movies he made himself, Star Wars, the first three Indiana Jones movies were filmed in England and on location in places like Jordan and Tunisia. And of course the prequels, which were all filmed in Australia. George didn't like having anybody mess with his vision. And I think the only person that I've ever read about that actually could talk him into doing something different is his ex-wife, Marcia, who, that's a whole nother story that I'm not going to get into. But really, when you're looking at movies like Star Wars, they're his vision. And he might have had to collaborate with brain-dead zombies like Larry Kasdan, but they did what he wanted. And collaborating with somebody like Steven Spielberg was a lot easier because A, they're best friends, B, they kind of know each other. They kind of understand each other. And that's where I'm at here. But as far as people like Barry Diller and other Hollywood executives, they're not that smart. They're not creatives. And they look at the industry as an industry, and in some, they're right about that. However, they really, because Hollywood executives have egos the size of Texas, really didn't like George because George didn't need them. He was, his headquarters was in San Francisco, and he wanted to do what he wanted to do without the studio sticking its nose where it didn't belong. And he delivered blockbusters for these people, and they still didn't appreciate it because they wanted control over the precious narrative and they didn't get it. So, and George is, again, exuding his need for independence on his museum. It's his museum. This is what he wants. And I have a feeling Miss Jackson Dumont and the rest of the wokesters that were fired, laid off, didn't want to put historically accurate things up about narrative arts. They were, as far as I could tell, woke activists, and he wouldn't tolerate it. Okay, and he basically took the reins back and gave them to a guy that he could trust. And, what George wants, George gets. Okay? And I really think the only real mistake that he made so far in his career is selling to Disney without a guarantee that he would be involved with the franchises. That his word would always be the last. Disney wanted complete control. They elbowed him out. And we have 3 disasters on our hands because of it. Again, let's put it this way. There are people at Lucasfilm that would have been fired years ago or let go years ago if George was still running the joint. Or if he had a say. And we all know who they are. He did the same thing at the museum that he would have done at Lucasfilm. Why? Because, as I said before, woke is the fascism Ronald Reagan warned us about. It's disguised as liberalism, but it's about as illiberal as you can get. So I just want to talk to you guys about this and hope you have a great day. See you around the galaxy.